All right, we are live. Okay, here we go. Okay, so the first one I want to play with is called jit.rota, and it stands for rotate. It lets you rotate the image, it lets you zoom the image, it lets you move the image, it lets you do all these crazy things. We're finally going to get some movement inside of all of this, and it's literally just jit.rota. It's nice, it's simple, we're just going to give it a bunch of arguments. So as I'm saying all this, this is an object. Objects have these little hard corners here with like the dark color inside and a slightly grayer thing inside here. And the objects are always, like I was saying before, they're actual blocks of code. There's actually they have behaviors, they have attributes, they have methods, and they actually do something. And another object is jit.grab, and we've been using that one to grab our camera information. And in terms of what that can do, sorry, I'll back up for a second. I can right-click and I can say open jit.grab help, and it'll show me the different things it can do. It's different behaviors, it's different attributes that we can access. And it's only an object that has attributes. It's only an object that has these kind of behaviors that actually process our data, or in the context of jitter, that process our matrix data or video data in some way and enact change on it. Now, when I use a message, and you can see it's like a little more rounded corner right here. There's no line across there. And I'm going to give it a message open. One thing right away, the message help, there's a help file for the message, but just about the message as a container, as a box. There's no specific open help, because the open is just I'm using the message just to communicate with an object and tell it that one of its predetermined behaviors or attributes or methods, I'm trying to access and change something about that so it behaves in a different way. And whenever you're sending an attribute to an object, it's always going to go in that first inlet. That first inlet is basically my hey, I'm listening for how to change things, unless it has an inlet that is kind of like Max's way of saying, this so often needs to be changed really quickly that I'm just going to give you access to that in a different way. And I'll show you what I mean in just a second with that. So we also have my QMetro object, and I have to give it an argument of how often it's sending out a bang. And this one has something right here, and if I hover over it, it says set metronome time interval. And it's a cold inlet. You can see it has that little blue around it. It's its way of saying I'm not going to actually pass info along if you give me a message in here. And it's really just based on the object. Each object is expecting different things, has different behaviors, and when you instantiate them, they'll show you what inlets they have. A switch was a great example of that. I made switch 6, and because of that, it gives me 6 inlets. And each of those inlets just corresponds to the inlets that I could switch between. So in terms of inlets and outlets, one really simple thing you can do is just while the patch is unlocked, if you hover over it, and this kind of thing you can't read at the moment, it usually tells you what that inlet is doing or what's coming out of that outlet. One interesting thing about outlets that's a little frustrating and confusing, most objects always have something called dump out, which is almost always the last outlet. And it's the way of saying sometimes if you want to send a get message to something like get frames, get duration, get this, it usually comes out of this dump out thing, while the data that you're processing usually comes out of that first outlet. That's kind of the structure of that. I will say though, the best thing you can do is just go into the help file and just check what are the inlets and outlets doing and what are its expected behaviors, because it's not, it changes on object to object basis. So that's the safest way to figure out what's happening with that. To address another thing, if I just type gobbledygook into an object, this is, I think, Sophia, what you were talking about? Yeah. Yeah, this just means that it's saying you tried to make an object, this does not exist in the world of Max, and it doesn't even have any inlets or outlets. So that might be the case if you tried making an open message in an object and it looked like it didn't work. It's because the open only works as a message and not as an object. So that's what it's trying to tell you. It's like, I don't know what that is. It also comes up in the Max console here. Open, no such object. But we can't be stopped. We've got our setup here. We got matrix data with that green cord coming out of here. It's going into the jit.rota. And I got a little jit window. I'll say @floating1. And that is just me accessing an attribute that, even though like with QMetro33, so often like the only thing you would do with QMetro, so it's kind of like they just made it that like if I receive an argument on this object, I'll know it's for the interval. But for more complex attributes or arguments, you have to actually use the symbol to like dive in and say, that's what I'm addressing, that's what I'm trying to give you information about. And I'm going to say, I want you to float on top of the patch so that while I'm coding in front of you, you can see what's happening. And there's me, and it's extremely not well lit, but that's fine because I'm self-conscious and what?
That attributes.
Yeah.
That's the same thing as the stuff you control in the inspector. Those are also attributes.
Well, I was controlling with what?
Like you can control attributes from the inspector, that object.
No, it's actually the attributes are more like this is the same thing as me accessing an attribute. It's just sending the message floating to it. Normally with the inspector is kind of it annoys me because like it doesn't have a great coding example, but I guess you can change different parts of the attributes here. I guess like let's see here. Yeah, there is a section that says floating and there's a little toggle right here, and I could override that right there. So a lot of attributes that are accessible through here are also accessible in the inspector window. I would recommend, unless it's a GUI object, don't use the inspector to change those things. And when I say GUI object, I mean like jit.p window, and it just turns into something and I can't enter code into it to change it. The best way to enter something to change it is probably through the inspector. Otherwise, I would stick to messages or the @ symbol for changing the behavior of something.
What's the purpose of a GUI object?
User interface. Like you're going to be using these almost as an interface while you perform. So if you wanted to change, if I had a slider and I wanted to change the value of something and rather type a number into it, like I actually wanted to see a representation of that. So, but they're not necessary. They're just like a different way of like interacting with your patch or visualizing how you want to send it information. So the jit.rota object, I need to send it information. We've established I'm going to do that with a message. And first thing I can say is offset x, and it finished it for me. You can see there's an underscore here, $1, and I made an integer box because it expects an integer. And if I send that to jit.rota, I can slide the image back and forth along the x dimension. And we're just saying offset this matrix by this amount of pixels. And it can go in either way. And then the same thing with, sorry, if I hold Option and drag off of something while it's unlocked, I just get like a mirror image of that. You could also just do copy paste. And now I'm doing offset Y. And I'll grab an integer box right here. And now I can move the image up and down.
What's up with that? Are there just the matrix being cleared up?
Exactly. If I sent a message clear to the jit.rota object, it would clear that out. But what's actually happening is as I'm sliding this image around, the matrix is still recording its last known pixels that it received from that area. And once there's not something updating continuously over the top of it, it just leaves it there almost as a ghost image. And I can change the behavior. Or what were you going to say?
I was just curious, like, what is the difference between jit.rota and jit.matrix?
Everything with these green patch cords is a matrix? JIT matrix is like how we're at. There's an actual object that we used in the last class that allowed us to look at like the planes and the data and the dimensions. And that's just kind of like this container object that allows us to change things about that. But a lot of other objects also allow us to do that. And like whenever we think of a video frame or an image frame in Max, we're actually just thinking of a matrix. And we're thinking of 4 planes of this many cells by this many rows and this many columns with this number stored at that. And now I'm going to take that number and I'm going to show that visually as a representation of red or green or blue and mix them together. So all this data we're working with is a JIT matrix. So that's kind of why I interchangeably use the term matrix and image, is because as far as Max is concerned, they're the exact same thing. So yeah, that one's pretty, you get that. But I could also do theta as a message, and that's just a fancy way of saying the rotation. And I'm actually going to give it a float. And you would think that it would be 0 to 360, but it's actually represented as 2 pi is a full rotation. And by that logic, pi is a half rotation. And so on. Pi divided by 2 is quarter. And I'm going to use the JIT movie object just because it's so dark that I don't feel like we actually have a good sense of what's happening with that. So I'm just going to switch over to read rather than open. Cool, now we got something a little more colorful and it's obvious what's happening. You can see I'm moving around and this is that trail that's being left behind. And I'll reset that to 0 so it's nice and centered. And I'll send this to jit.rota. And you can see as I'm rotating it, it's rotating, but it's actually rotating from the upper left corner. So we also can define the anchor. Yeah, basically the pivot point. And I can do that with another message, which is anchor _x $1. I'll just copy paste that. I'll change it to y. And this one is a little tricky because in order to use this effectively, I actually have to know the dimension of the matrix that I'm working with. And what I mean by that is like, what's the resolution? And you remember, I hope, hopefully, there's a JIT FPS GUI object. And when I hit enter, it turns into that. And this lets us like visualize information about a matrix signal that's coming. So if I take the JIT movie and it's showing us the frame rate, and we get 30 frames a second, that's great because we're doing a Q Metro at 33, which is about 30 frames a second. And I can actually click on this part while it's doing that, and I can go to dim, and it's showing me what the dimension of the matrix is. We have like kind of like a, not HD, but almost there, 1280 by 720. And if I want to get it into the, if I want to set the anchor point so that things rotate around the center, I actually need to do half of whatever this dimension is. Because this is 0, 0 for our matrix up in this corner of the movie, and this is 1280 by 720. So that would be 640 as the x, and 360 as the y. And now I can rotate the movie from the center position. Yeah. What if you wanted to what?
So it says, instead of doing that math yourself in your head, what if you wanted to just have Max calculate that for you? Like, is there a way to like get the dimension info out of the jit.lumakey and then?
Yeah. There's ways of let's see. Honestly, the way I would do it is I would make a JIT matrix and say for char, and I just put 1280 by 720, and I'd intercept the movie. And this way, now no matter what movie comes out of here, it'll automatically downsample or upsample it to 1280 by 720. And then I don't have to worry about what the dimension is. The other thing I could do, I think there is a way to send a message to it. It's like get dim, and then you report every time a new movie's read. And if that was like something where the fidelity of the resolution was really important to you, you could build it out like that. But this is just kind of a way of guaranteeing that everything that comes out of JIT movie gets transformed into that dimension size. And maybe you don't like this kind of thing going on right here with the trails. I showed you how you could send a clear message. There's also something called bound mode. And this just takes an integer. And bound mode is 0 equals don't erase pixels and don't repeat. 1 is do erase pixels and don't repeat. I'll just like to show you. So now if I move to 1, the behavior is now whenever I move the image outside of its original frame, it'll just turn those pixels to be represented as black. So I don't have to worry about clearing it. I can slide it around and all that. If I do 2, I believe it repeats the image. So now you can see it's like taking the top here and it started repeating it, and you can even see this faint line around it. 3 is it clamps the image. So what's doing here is it's taking the very, very, very edge pixel, the last one it sees, and it's just shooting that off for infinity and stretching out across. I rotate maybe. What's that?
For the bottom one.
What do you mean?
Assuming for the top, it's not the bottom.
It is doing that for. Oh, because I've rotated it to a point where, I guess you can kind of see it in this corner. Right. So just the original information is still within the bounding box of the window, so it's not stretching it out there. It'll make more sense when I build one more last effect.
From 0 onwards, right? So it starts here and then continues here. So these are dimensions that will happen.
Exactly. And then 4 does a mirror effect. So it actually just like mirrors across it. And then there's one more effect. I'll just copy paste this. And that is zoom X and zoom Y. Oh, sorry, and these require a float. And to get a float, you can just hit F. Or there's also the integer box here. If you click on that, you can choose flow num instead of number. Now, it's zoomed in at like 0.2, 25%. And I've got this really sick mirrored image color blaster thing going on. And if I reset the rotation and the offset, and I send the same value to zoom X and zoom Y, it basically just becomes like a pinch. Like there it is at the original. Now I'm like zooming in. If I zoom to really low values like this, yeah. Mm-hmm.
But in terms of workflow, I'm a bit confused as to maybe just apply all those things to that specific part of the patch, and then after that go into glue and cut scissors.
That's exactly what
Is
you
there
do.
like patching within patch, like just because I assume things sort of get messy, like is there a way of like making a tiny patch and then including a patch within
Mm-hmm.
patch?
There's a couple of ways you could do this, and that's a totally valid question. You're completely right in that you would do these effects first and then send each one to the JIT glue. If I did JIT glue and I glued together a bunch of whole movies and then I fed it into this jit.rota thing, it would treat that whole JIT glue grid movie thing as one panel, as one matrix of information, and it would rotate all the movies relative to each. It wouldn't like turn this one, this one, this one, this one. It would turn that whole frame as one. Does that make sense? Sometimes what you would do is if you found an effect that you really like here, you might actually just have to go and go at rota da 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 da, and you have to actually hand type like all the attributes into the object, because then you could close the patch and load it, and it would save. There's
Okay, so you're saying, okay, I like this the way that it is, I want to mess with it, so
Mhm.
it's hard code it into the actual object.
Yes. And you guys have to take notes on that. The other thing, which I'll show you in next class, but for those of you that are a little impatient, which I totally understand, or not impatient, just like it's annoying to have like the stuff that you make disappear each time. You don't know how to get back. There's an object called Precept, and if I just bring this in and I do shift-click on a cell, it'll remember every single like the toggle, any integer box, any float box. And now if I change anything and I click back on this, it'll just go back to what all my previous values were. I'm not going to spend, it's a little more complex than that. And a lot of ways it can kind of like, not screw you over, but just it gets a lot to manage. But for those of you that, it's called Precept. And it's an object. If you open up the help file, like it should get you going if you really want to jump into that. Yeah. Or, sorry, Rebecca, you had a question. I didn't even.
How do you delete the window if you want it
How do you delete the window of what?
you want it
If you want what?
to delete the window that the JIT window?
Yeah. How do you delete it? Oh, it's like a weird thing about this object. As long as this object called JIT window exists, it's what's responsible for making our floating window. So if I delete this object, our window also disappears. So its only job is, once it becomes a real object in this max patch, is it creates a window that floats around that'll display and represent our video data.
Is there no way to like turn off certain I guess, patches while you're working?
Yes, there is.
Because like sometimes like I found myself wanting to like work on different videos, but like they would all the windows would just like pop up on my screen and I didn't want that.
Mm-hmm.
So is there a way to like turn some off?
Part of it is just like not having all your patches open, like, or like learning how to like segment your patches. Like I'm working on this, I can close this one while I'm working on that, and starting to bring them all together. Also, like if you're using multiple JIT windows to look at things along the way, then like I would suggest using the P window, or the patcher window, and essentially like usually it's your Q Metro driving everything. So like if you want to turn things on and off, it's kind of a matter of like how many of these do I have, what are they driving, do I need to like set up another one somewhere else and turn that on or off. In terms of like actively turning off like these windows, like you could do it with that visible message that we saw before. And you could just be like, I'm not working on that one right now. I'm going to make it disappear. One thing to be concerned about though is like even if you disappear this like window, it's still, your computer's still doing all the processing power on this stuff with like each of these bangs coming out and telling it to like play the movie and whatnot. So if you still have all this running in the background, your computer might just start to slow down.
Yeah, I actually, well, I wasn't able to do that yet, the physical things, I didn't know about it, but I did realize that my computer was going really slow.
Yeah.
I'm not working.
When you have decimals, it's because you like manually put it in, not because you decide it to them.
There's decimals because I made a specific number box for decimals.
Oh,
It's called if hotkey F.
I see.
And then if you see that little dot for the decimal, that means you could do a float, and I can like grab in this area.
Okay.
But this one can't do a float. I was going to say you should look into encapsulation. I'll show you what it is very quick, and then we're going to talk about it again. No. If I just select everything like right here, and I go to Edit, Encapsulate, it'll make a little patch with all of my code in it. And if I double click on that, it organizes all my code for me. And I could bring up that patch and be like, oh, I actually want to change that. What's that? Yeah. Does anyone remember how I did it? Edit. Edit, encapsulate. And it's whatever you have highlighted or selected. Like I have all those with the blue boxes around it. It'll just encapsulate it. Cool.
Do you have a visual way of knowing what things are encapsulated?
Yeah, you can. You can actually give it a name. So it says P, and then I could be like Rota effects, and then I give that name, and now I know that when I double click this box, everything in it is the Rota effects I stored in it. All right. I'm gonna show you one other thing really quick with this one, and then we're going to take a break. You guys have a lot of questions, and that's great. I'm loving it. And then I'll get to some other things. But one of the things we can play with is the MSP stuff, the audio signals I was kind of talking about. So I'll start talking about that very quick. I'm going to make an object called EasyDAC, which is an absolutely inscrutable sounding thing. With this little tilde symbol at the end of it. Much in the same way that any jitter object has the word jit in front of it, which means it's part of the movie video imaging library of Max. MSP is the audio side of Max, and all audio-related objects have a tilde symbol in front of it. When I hit enter here, it does that thing we love where it turns into something that looks like nothing like what it was before. And this is basically Max's, this would be our output to our computer speakers, are these two inputs here. But when we use audio in Max, we have to turn audio on, weirdly enough. And the easiest way to do that is by clicking on that little icon. So now audio is on in Max, now audio is off in Max. And that applies to the audio objects. If you're asking for a sine wave, that sine wave will be constantly generating. We actually don't have to send it bangs like we do the movie object. But once I turn that off, it's no longer generating that sine wave. Let's make a sine wave. I bet you think it's called sine wave. You're wrong. It's called cycle with a tilde. And a sinusoidal oscillator. And we can give it a frequency. And I could give it a frequency of like 440, and we would start to hear it. But I don't actually want to hear this sine wave. I just want to take the numbers from the sine wave and have it hooked up to my effects. So I'm going to do something like 0.2. And I'm going to make an object called number with a tilde. And it turns into what looks like our integer box. And I can hook this up here. And now we see a value that's going between -1 and 1. And you're probably thinking to yourself, thanks, Matt. I got this. I can take it from here. I'm just going to hook it up to my effect. And you'll be baffled of why it does not connect to any of these number boxes. So this yellow chord here means that you're getting an MSP signal. Even though it can be represented as a number, it's actually different than what we're thinking of in terms of integers and floats and even strings and whatnot. And I'm not going to spend too much time onto why that is, because MSP is not my greatest subject, and I just basically telling you it's a different data type that has its own logic, and it's designed to work with other objects that have tilde in it. But I can make an object called Snapshot, and it says convert signal values to numbers, and it has a tilde, and I can give it a metro. It could be the same metro running your jit.movie object over here, but just for the sake of this, I'm going to make a new one because it's already getting kind of crowded here. I'll make an integer. Nope, not an integer, a float. And every time, it's a lot like the jit.movie object, every time the snapshot gets a bang, it's asked to report what the current signal is, and it turns it into a number. So now I have this rising and falling value between -1 and 1. And now I can just hook it up to something like Zoom. And we're starting to get some movement in our patch.
For the number, can you just put in tilde?
What's that?
The one that's moving, the number, you just put in tilde?
Yeah, the snapshot object here.
No, the one next to it.
Oh, this one. Yeah, it's number with a tilde,
Oh.
just as the object itself.
It would have the properties of the sine wave of translate that to the
Exactly. Yes.
What's the start of it?
Snapshot. So the actual MSP audio signal here, even though we're seeing it represented as a number right here, the type of data and how Max thinks of audio signals is different than like a float or an integer. And we actually need to convert it from this yellow chord, this audio signal, to a float so we can use it with other more vanilla Max objects. And Snapshot is just set up that when it receives a signal and then you send it a bang, every time it gets a bang, it turns that signal into a float or a number that we can hook up to the rest of the Max world.
And it's not that there is a cycle object for that tilde, but it's not oscillated.
It's a completely different thing.
The reason why I didn't hook it up to the metro,
Oh,
it needs a different metro.
there really isn't a reason other than I thought this was ugly and messy, and you guys might get confused if I did that. They both work just fine. That is a best practices thing I haven't really talked about, though, that I'm just going to touch on really quickly. For all of your patches, it generally behooves you to only have one Q metro. So even if I wanted to play 9 movie objects, rather than being like Q metro 33, jit movie, Q metro 33, jit movie, a really common convention in Max, this is gonna, I think this might blow your mind, I'm not sure. I can say send and give it a name. I'm going to give it a name draw. It doesn't have to be draw, it can be anything. And I'm going to make an object called receive, and I'm going to call it draw. And I'll make a toggle, and I'll turn the toggle on. And now, anywhere that has an object called receive draw will receive what's ever coming out of the send draw object. And a very common convention in Max, especially when you're working with video, is to just have one Q metro at 33 with a send draw message. And everywhere you need to update something or you have a new movie playing, you just type in receive draw, and you use that as the driving force for how to play that movie. And one nice benefit of that is it actually guarantees that everything is happening in sync, because you know that everything's happening off of one individual bang from that first Q metro, and you're not asking your computer, to keep track of this Q metro that's firing 33 times a second, this Q metro, and this Q metro. And if you wanted, there's actually an object called QLim too, where you can have it change you can limit the amount of messages that come through. So if I wanted something to only update every 250 milliseconds, but I didn't want to make a whole new one, or a whole new Q metro, I could have it limited so it only reports a bang every 250 milliseconds, or every 1 second. Like say, like I want a random number every second, but I want it to be hooked up to the same Q metro that's driving the rest of my stuff. I can just make this Q lim and be like, limit this to just once every second. Yeah, it's just the convention in Max of like that you just have to have the audio on or off, and that's how it represents. I think it's like something like DSP state, turn on, turn off. It's also represented down in this bottom right corner. I just can't do it for this walk. It's just a part of the MSP library in the same way that like JIT movie has like use bangs to drive it. MSP is like, I'll turn everything on by having the easy adapter on or off.
But they don't look the same though. Is it just a refresh thing, or you have to change the places of the...
I saw that. I think it's just the refresh rate. Because we're sending it so fast that I think there's like a weird oscillation thing of where we see that pickup in the bang is like just different. Like I bet if I change this to 250, it'll be in sync. Hmm? It might be that. I don't know. I know they're sending the same thing, but anyway, that's a best practices thing for setting all this up, is generally having one Q metro.
In this example, can you replace cycle with just like an audio file?
That's a little different. I don't quite know. I know how to, we could do like amplitude, but I guess part of it is just there's so much that's comprised of what's in an audio file that how do I get one exact number from it? You know, like you have to think about what is the property of the audio file that I'm trying to translate into a number.
Because the cycle would be getting the cycle, what the amplitude, the phase of the cycle, what is the period, value of
Mm-hmm. Again, I'm no expert in MSP, so like I'm more just showing you a hack of like a fun way to start generating movement. And like you could use the counter object. That's like a non-MSP way of like generating rising and falling values. But like a lot of times, there's a really great one just called rand. It's just a random waveform. And now it's a little bit like Perlin noise, and it just has its own logic of how it moves through things. And I could also like make one that not everything needs -1 to 1, so I could scale -1 to 1 from 0 to, what was it, 6.28. And now we have our theta value.
That's like the map function.
It's exactly like the map function.
And wait, and that changes the sign rate?
What's that?
Does that change the sign rate?
No, it's so we were receiving a value from the sine wave that was -1 to 1, but then I have an attribute over here that needs a value between 0 and 6.28. So I'm just scaling or mapping that value to fit our new. And you'll do that a lot. It's all about like, how am I getting data from over here and then massaging or repackaging that data to fit the parameters or the range of another thing that's happening. So.
This is a more organizational question, but like, so you have a value like 2 pi or something. It's like kind of like, you don't want to remember what the digits of pi are. Then you do things with rotation. Is there a way to like set like a global variable or something?
Kind of get what you're saying, but also not. There's a way to set a global variable.
Or just like say like, oh, this is pi, and I don't have to remember what pi is every
Now I know what you're saying. No, not really. Or not in any way where it wouldn't be just as much work as being right pi is 3.14.
Yeah.
Or if you need the full range of it, like you could build something that like calculated it for you and gave you the full range out to its decimal point. I mean, how are you feeling? Like, do you need a break? You can say yes. Let's take a break. Okay. Let's say 10 minutes.
In the inspector, there's an @ sign which shows the actual attribute name. So if you want to like change that attribute, you can know the name and just type it in.
Yes.
Yeah.
A lot of objects have almost like 20 attributes. So using the @ symbol is a way of addressing that specific
You
attribute.
just list it and you like
Yeah.
choose from it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Oh, no. I'll let you have your break. But you can come up and ask me questions because I'm a total geek about this stuff.
Let me ask something. If
Yeah.
you want to completely reset your video, like band, like if I hit the band, like it shows the actual video without all the filters and everything.
Yeah.
Is there like an if state?
I think it would be this preset object. You would just want to, when everything's set up and you have all your effects and your filters, but they're all set to a point where they don't do anything,
Yeah.
then you would want to record that as a preset. And then you have a button that you can click where it all returns to that original state. There's no magic, or there's no other way where you could just be like everything reset, because it doesn't know what reset means to you. So I think.
So this is the only way. If you hit that, though, it can go back. Can it go back and forth?
Yeah, and then you could save another state of all of it, and then you click on that one. So like each of these becomes like a different state that your system was at, and if you click on one, you can save whatever that state is, and then whenever you click on it, it'll recall everything instantaneously.
Okay. How do you save it?
So if I just hold Shift and click,
Yeah.
see how that turned into like gray,
Okay.
and like there's nothing of it now. If I go back here, like I guess when I did that one, this toggle was closed, and now if I go here, it's on.
Okay.
So, but I mean that's the thing. You just shift and then you click on a different cell, and it'll save there,
Different
and you could
state.
overwrite it. You could even like write a file if you wanted to make sure you didn't lose it, and it'll save it, and you could load that file in.
So if you want the original, like without the manipulation, you have to save it as the first thing, like, right?
Yeah, and like I tend to do that where like I'm building and I'm experimenting, and I settle in and I say like, okay, this is what I think I want to do for a performance, and I'll like open the patch and I'll set everything to where it's like in a nice clean state, and I'll use the preset to like save like this is my and or like if I'm like tweaking things, I'm like I don't like where this went. I'm gonna start from scratch and see if I can find a better version of that. So
Okay, cool.
yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, I got a matrix control question. I think I understand it a little bit. I'm
Okay.
trying to. Okay, so let's clear this. So the matrix control is like not. So say you have you're doing a 3x3 thing. You've
Yeah.
got 3 columns, 3 rows, 3 columns. If you do like a diagonal line down here, this is like the normal like mapping.
That's
of
totally it. Yeah.
And then if you say you move that over, then all of a sudden the one that was here is now over here.
Yeah, you totally got it.
Another thing I'm trying to figure out is like how do you send messages to like to switch this all around?
So there's a couple of it. One thing too, I remember now. This has a behavior where you can have it not repeat itself.
Yeah, that's what I want. I want that. But I don't know how to do that. Because you wanted to do is randomize and then not randomize without repeating, so you can then like cycle through different configurations of it almost. If that makes sense.
I still don't know how to verbally express what it's doing. You know what I mean? Like you showed me, I'm like, right, that's exactly what it does. But I'm like let me use words.
Yeah,
to
I know. I
describe
also
this.
don't know how to verbally express what that is exactly. I mean, it's like a mapping. It's like a 2-dimensional mapping of. It's like the matrix is like a possibility space of like you can like this could this one could map to here. I don't know how to express that properly though. Wait, what do you do?
I'm trying to. It's like I think it's a specific attribute. One column. Is that it?
Yeah, that seems right.
Oh, or one matrix actually.
What's the
I think column would be. Let's see.
Oh yeah, I see.
Oh, you can't have more than one in a column.
Yeah.
Let's see, one matrix.
That's like one column. No? Oh, what does that actually
Ah.
do? Well.
This is fun. And you know, the funny thing is, as you're showing me this, I'm like, I totally fucking wrote that code once. And I remember I was like, this is not the best way to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how do I just send random values to
Yeah.
each one? Because
Yeah.
it's like, the one at 0, 0 needs to be.
Yeah, exactly. And there's some crazy list comprehension thing or something you can do
Yeah.
for it, right?
Like, it's got to be like a ZL list thing, you know? Remember that object?
No, I actually
Oh,
don't.
it's like, once you get in the list, it's like just a suite of different ways to do things to lists. Like, show the similarities between two lists. Delace one,
like
so 1,
unzipping
2,
it?
1, 2,
Yeah.
1, 2. Slice off like the first three. Group everything after this, and it's just like all these different names for.
Yeah.
That was that ZL Scramble one I did,
Oh.
where I gave it a list of Scramble. And I gave it a list of 1, 2, 3. And
Oh
just-
yeah, this is what that's kind of what we're going for. This is now it's like how do you scramble some sort of input to this that like reorganizes the
Yeah.
mapping. Yeah. Okay. So I think that gets me like 85% of the way there. And it's like,
But it might just be building this out one time and like using the scramble to like feed to different.
yeah.
I mean, would that just work? Have you tried that yet?
No, I have not tried that yet.
But
This
this-
isn't gonna work because this is actually just the first like square over here, because this is like 3 by 3, not 9 by 9.
Oh. But yeah, the good question is, could you just get the index point of each of these, tell it what value? No.
Yeah, no.
You're on your own.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks.
Great
You
job,
figured it
Bill.
out, yeah.
You're doing great.
If you figured it out, share it.
I will.
So I think I just totally did everything,
Yeah.
but I haven't received numbers. Why?
Oh, okay. Partly, that's an integer.
Yeah.
So, I think,
Right, and float.
okay, so, and then also you have to,
Yeah.
the bang needs to be sent in there.
Yeah, but
So, because it's a float, it's just always rounding down to 0.
but that's it.
That's
and then
it.
it should work, right?
Oh, but this is
whatever
also an integer.
Okay. Okay.
Still
Yeah, because it doesn't have the 0 point, right? It's just 0, and not 0 point.
not. It is because, well, one we would need to scale the value from -1 to 1 to 0 to 6. So we're make sure to make these float. Also, let's open up this. Maybe it's going to tell us. Yep. Okay, no, we're not. down here. Okay, your object works. Oh, did you zoom? No. What is going on?
No, really. Maybe I haven't saved it or told you.
Actually, escort is something.
Okay, so it's something buggy, whatever.
Yeah, but I haven't seen a bug like this in a long time.
Okay.
Talk to me after class if you
It
can't
always
get
happens to
it.
me, so I'm really not surprised.
Hey,
For some reason, my video didn't play.
it doesn't play a lot,
No,
or
it doesn't play at
oh, okay.
It's like, it freeze. No, like, this is something like weird.
This is what?
This is unrelated. So I think this was the
Oh,
first
okay.
note.
Oh, I see. So it's down.
So it's from here.
Oh, okay. Okay, so your video is playing. I think what happened
Yeah.
is you must have moved it
So this
somewhere off the. No. Sorry, go back to. So remember how you can like offset it and stuff? You might have just offset it so it's like here in relation to the frame, and they're just a frozen frame here. So it's,
What about the 42?
oh, I think I know what's going on. So here's what happened. Well, Zoom needs a float.
Oh, so
And-
0 means like it's
It's like so small, and when I sent a 0 to it, it just froze on that last frame.
I see. But, so I was really wrong here. Like
Yeah.
when you start measuring, I think you started to start, that is you jump to
Yeah, they're just different types of like sine, or just in different types of audio waves.
what does it mean? Like, so start from here, like I didn't.
Oh, totally.
Yeah, I was like, oh.
So you don't. So this. So I wanted to make a waveform from an MSP object, and there are a couple of different ones. There's like cycle, which is a sinusoidal waveform, and you can tell at what frequency. There's also phaser. Like there's just different versions. This is like a sawtooth signal. So rather than being like this, it's like doop, 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 doop. And that's 0.2. The random is a little more like Perlin noise, where it's just a waveform. It just instead of like a random value each time, it goes to a random location, and it goes to another random location, and so you get actually like rising and falling values, but you don't know where it's going to go. But they all behave in the same way where they give you a value between -1 and 1. This is just like consistent sine
So
wave.
0.2 means it just goes from 0 to 0.2 and then.
No, it's the speed at which it goes. So if you hear like a frequency of like a sound, like my voice is 750 hertz or something. Like that means like 750 times a second.
Vibration.
Yeah, but it's like that vibration. But we don't want something to move that fast when we're moving through our video stuff. So I have like it's 0.2 hertz, so that we actually get that rise and that fall, and then it becomes something we can visualize as an effect. And we can. It's kind of weird because we just need to send a regular
But
float.
there's two sets of the flow here, right?
What's that?
You have 2 sets of where?
Yes. One, because I wanted a different random value going here and a different one going here. If I use the same one, they'd both be in sync with each other because they're doing the same values. Does that make sense?
I think if I fix the zoom thing, then I can look at it and see how it goes.
So, and for this one, see here, I tried to like output a number, but it doesn't go up. Is it because I didn't?
Oh, it was because I saw it happen. You hooked up an integer.
Oh,
So
how,
it's always rounding to a full value.
how do I put? How do I not round it?
If you go to here, yeah, there's a flow num box.
Cool.
And a lot of objects, so like even over here, that was the problem, is you have to send it a float rather.
So for all of them, or
Yeah, for all of them. Okay, this is,
or and also for these.
no, and that's part of just getting to know each object and each attribute. If I go into the help, I could go to like jit.rota reference, and this actually gives me like a breakdown of all the different attributes. And you can see anchor X, the one we have here, it's telling me that it needs an int. And it's saying it's like offset based on the pixels of the image. But
Others definitely need a flow.
yeah, within the zoom, it's saying it needs a float.
Okay.
And it's like based on like 0.5 would be 50% zoom in or zoom down. And it's like, it's annoying. It's like, you're like, how do I know which? And like, why is it different and change? And you just kind of have to check the documentation of each object or see how they use it in the help. And there's usually a logic. It's just not always like the greatest logic. Does that make sense? Yeah. All right, we got 40 minutes, so I'm just going to jump right back to it. We are already running out of time to get through what I'm realizing now is a very ambitious list of objects to cover. So I'm going to go to one of my, I've made video tutorials and patches and examples with like comments on every single one of these objects for this week. So hopefully those can fill in some of the blanks. So I'm just going to jump ahead. Yes?
Your comments I really thought professional. Like how you did the comments and patches.
Thank you. Hi. That's nice to hear. I spend a lot of time on them. What's that? The videos? Cool. I'll keep. Are the videos? Is there anything I can do better with the videos, or I usually just like start doing them? Okay, cool. Also, I swear to God, if you guys like have specific things you want me to cover that I can help you with, I'll make videos for that and share them with everybody. So, what was this? Rota.
Maybe learn one video of your experience as performer. So what can we expect when we are going to perform, like setting up or the experience, something goes wrong or what it means? Yeah.
If you come in and do some like 3-point lighting and put a DSLR on a tripod and just let me talk at it, I'll totally shoot a couple of videos like that. Now the one thing to remember when you're performing, you cannot, don't take your eye off of the performance. The audience can sense any kind of like fear that you have. You cannot have any fear in front of your. They will feast upon you, and your anxiety and your neurosis. Okay, there you go. I'm losing myself. I will talk about performance more as we go along in this class. I'm going to show you how to do video feedback. I think it's the coolest thing in the world. It's the basis of a lot of things I do. Jitter does it really well. You may not know what I'm talking about. But to get there, we got to start with jit.lumakey. And whoa, that's really big. I love it. Jit.lumakey. And what we're saying is we are going to use Luminance to key out certain areas of the image, which essentially is the same thing as green screen, except instead of color, we're using the brightness of an image or the lack of brightness. So I will go jit.grab, message, open. Oh my God, you guys, the amount of times you're going to type QMetro33, jit.grab, message, open, hook them up, toggle. I can't tell you how many times I've done this in my life. Like, you just do it from scratch every single time. You're like, maybe I could make like some kind of macro that just does that. And you're like, no, it still doesn't take that long. But what you guys feeling like a jit.p window this time? Yeah, I am too. Glad to hear it. I really do this just to entertain myself. I'm like talking and then you don't give me answers back and I'll answer myself. It's all good. I did that little thing where I cleaned up the patch cord with a little Command Y and now I gotta like smooth it around and now I have all this room right here for my attributes. I can just go hog wild on those attributes, laying them out. Oh yeah. Oh, that's a nice clean.
How'd you get it to go down? Oh. Sorry.
Whoa!
The jit, FPS.
What's that? The JIT FPS? What?
The screen.
Oh, sorry. JIT.p window. So Luma Key. Luma Key expects 3 arguments. Tall, short for tolerance. Lum, short for luminance. And fade, short for nothing. It's just the word fade. And each of these expect a float. One thing I notice consistently among many of your patches, which I take full fault for, is a lot of you are using integer boxes where you're using floats. And whenever you feed a float into an integer box, it automatically rounds it off for you and it turns it into an integer. So sometimes if an attribute is expecting a float and you give it an integer, it doesn't behave properly. So just to clarify that, this number box up here, this is a number or integer, and this flow num is a float. So you can see this little dot right here tells me that I can do decimal values. The reason I just keep typing F and it makes it for me, and I type I and it makes it for me. So that's why I'm like just floating, like they're coming out of nowhere. So make sure you have a float.
If you're feeding float to this message, does the message need to have the dot too?
Sorry?
Does the message also need to have the dot?
No, that's a great question. The $1 thing is literally saying just whatever I receive. It could be I could send a string to it, and it would still represent it as a string. That's kind of like the message boxes are really dumb. Like they don't have any inner working really than to like hold, and the only thing they can really do is that $1 trick. Other than that, they just pass along whatever is literally in it. It's literally passing along the string tall and then followed by a number. So it doesn't adapt to anything in any other way like that. And these 3 arguments do pretty simple things. You can see that as I'm raising the tolerance, we're starting to key some of the images out. And we need to have something that we actually put into that. What am I trying to say? We need to fill that negative space with something. We need essentially like our material behind the green screen. So just for this example, I'll do jit noise for char 3224. I'm just saying I want it to make a matrix of nonsense data that has 4 planes of information. It's all 0 to 255, and it's 32 by 24 resolution. And we just end up with this kind of colorful bit of noise like this. And now you can see that what I've been doing is I'm using the tolerance for how sensitive it is to keying out the brightness of certain values. And whatever I feed into this second inlet here is being replaced in those areas. And that's just consistent with the object. It'll always key out the areas of the first inlet and replace it with whatever it's getting in the second inlet. And I could Make sense so far?
Question.
Yeah.
So this is affected by the auto exposure of the camera. Can Max control that, or is it something that you have to change in the system?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
That is affected by the exposure of your camera, which is on auto. Right?
Yes.
Can Max control that, or do we have to do it through the system?
Yes and no. You could have Max control the system. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't think there's any way to access the cam. Basically, he's asking, can we use Max to tell our little webcam right here whether it should be auto exposure or whatnot? And the answer is no, but we could write like shellcode in Max or something else that would tell our system to change its behaviors. So the luminance, you can see as I'm like moving it through, it's setting the basis for whether it's going for the darkest parts of the image, which is 0. You see I'm wearing this kind of black sweater right here, and even though the tolerance is really low, it's automatically keying all of it out. And then as I move it up, my face has kind of like an orange-white kind of like texture to it. That's what's being keyed out, and now it's like checking for like a slightly brighter part of the image. All the way, I bet if I go higher and higher, like the background of our max patch will be what's keyed out eventually. Yep. And that's like almost as close to white as possible if you think about it. So 0 is representing like dark information in the luminance values, and 1 for the luminance is representing the lighter kind of luminance values of the image. And our tolerance is literally almost like saying, like, anything, if I had a tolerance of 0, it would only do pixels that were 0.988. And like, we have to think back to like, no, I'm not going to type the word calculator into a comment. I'm going to bring out the calculator. We're representing our pixels as 0 to 255. So 0.998 times 250, or 0.998 times 255. This would be saying essentially key out any pixel that's about 253. And if I set this to like 0.03, we would be saying key out any pixel that's 0.03% more than 253, or sorry, I'm like losing myself, or less than 253. So this is kind of like our range, so to speak. If this is setting like our key like basis, the tolerance is like how much in either direction of brighter or less than, or like brighter or darker than, are we allowing to come through in this?
So when there's no information, big noises use it.
What's that?
Like if you see an Instagram, Photoshop, where there's no information, that it's gonna feel that.
Exactly. And then fade is just a way, you can see like it's very literal, and it's like application to pixel by pixel. This is just a way of softening and smoothing the edges out, so that you don't get like such a harsh part of it. And between these 3 values, you can start to do this kind of like color mixing. And when we move into the midterm project where we're doing kind of like object theater and live cameras and trying to tell stories, this ability to kind of green screen and key out certain things is really going to like give us a tool for like being able to represent different locations or different places, or play movies in the background that tell different stories while we're like trying to act out with physical objects or cutouts or whatnot.
Can you access in the jit noise to, like, for example, key out information, key out like the grace values in the
Yeah, so that's another thing I
like
could.
an noise?
So no. I could flip this around and make a jit noise that's one plane, and that would be grayscale values. And then I could key out the jit noise. Wait, what's that? I think what I need to do. Oh, is it this? No. I will explain if this works. I'm going to check if I'm getting any errors. Yep. So, oh, okay. The reason it was happening is I tried changing my jit noise. Let me clean this up and I'll explain so that you're not staring at nothing here. So what I've done is I've just swapped the jit noise to be coming into as the first thing where I'm keying values out, and now I'm taking the camera information and having that would be what would replace the keyed out areas of the image. And the reason it wasn't working was I thought I could make this grayscale by just changing it to one plane. And what it was telling me was the first inlet, you're passing me something with one plane of just this grayscale information. And the second inlet, you're still passing me this 4-plane color plane ARGB thing. And I actually can't work if both matrices aren't the same amount of planes. And you'll find this happens sometimes with different objects. Like, it'll expect the dimensions when it's comparing the two of them to be the same, or it'll expect that the amount of planes are the same. And sometimes, like in this case, something's not working. I can open up the Max console here, and it's telling me what object is having a trouble, and I can try and figure it out from there. But I guess what I could do, I could hack. This is such a hack, and you may not. If it makes sense, great. If it doesn't, don't worry too much about it. I'm going to do jit RGB to Luma, so it'll turn this color matrix here to one plane, which is just luminance value, and then I'm going to say jit matrix for char 3224. So I'm going to resample it back up to 4 planes of information. And now I have a grayscale image that works with the 4-plane information coming in on the right side. But something else interesting happened, which I actually wanted to address. Notice how it's working, but everything is really pixelated, even though my original camera wasn't pixelated. A lot of jitter objects, when you give it something that's first inlet, and it's a certain resolution or dimension, it'll force every other inlet to match the resolution of that first inlet. So what it's doing is it's saying oh, this is 32 by 24, and this is much, much higher in its resolution. So in order to get them to work together, I'm actually going to downsample this to match the first inlet's resolution. It's not something that's too concerning that should affect you too much. It's just a good thing to know where maybe the first time you encounter it and you're like, I don't understand why this is happening. And you'll probably forget that I told you in this moment that's why it happened. But I could just upsample it to 1920 by 1080. Now we can key out these values. I can. So the other thing that's fun is, how do I want to do this? I don't want to delete this because I feel like you guys get upset when I delete things, understandably so, but I need to start from scratch. I'll save this. And then I'll delete everything. I can also do jit.chromakey. And chroma, in this case, just means that we can now do it with color. I'll still have the same jit noise, 4 char, 32 by 24. And I have the tall, $1, and I have the fade, $1. But now I need a color, $1, $2, $3, $4. And where we had that luminance attribute before, now we actually need to send it a color attribute to tell it what color it should be keying out. So I'll set that up. I'll set this up the same. I'll get a float. I got my little jit noise that I'll feed into this right inlet here. And, oh wait, none of you pointed out that I did a 5? Come on. I'm like staring you in the face. Now I'm at my jit.p window. And I really, like, let's say I want to do green. That would probably be something like 0, 0, 255, 0, right? That's just pure green because that first value in this color, it expects 4 arguments, and those arguments translate to the alpha, the red, the green, and the blue. And if I give it just 0 on the red and the blue, and 255 on the green, I'd have pure green. And we key that out, and we could all walk home, and we've got a blockbuster movie that we shot with cool visual effects. But what if I want to like pick a color on the fly? Or what if I want to do like an eyedropper tool on an image and key out a certain thing? There's some objects for that. There is the Swatch Object. And now, whenever I'm hooking something up to the right inlet of a message box, it's mainly for me. Whenever you hook up anything to the right inlet of a message box, it'll override anything in there and just show you what data is coming into it. And it won't even like pass it along. It just becomes this kind of storage container. It's really not that much different than if I did like a print, but I just like visualizing information this kind of quick way where I don't have to open the window up. And you can see like if I move it around, it's just taking what those values are and feeding it as a list. So this isn't so much a way of like building your patch for behavior, but whenever I do it, it's just a way of me representing data on the patch so you can debug what's actually coming out of an outlet. But it's this exact same thing in a sense as me just hooking it up to print and then seeing those values being printed out over here. So that's just to clarify that.
Is this 16 bit?
16-bit?
It's like a floating point. The RGB.
Like, so how many decimal places out will it go?
Yeah, it doesn't, it's supposed to be between 0 and 255.
Oh, so this is a float value. It is like float 32-bit. And I think we'll find out. We might need to convert it, or we might not. Like, this is just how color is represented by the Swatch object. And like, if I'm just like if I lock it and I'm moving it around, it's just giving me those. And you'll notice another thing that's kind of annoying, actually. So this happens in Mac sometimes. It's actually giving me the RGBA, even though our chroma key needs ARGB. And this is just kind of a thing that happens in programming a lot, where like sometimes people expect the 4 color channels to be ARGB, and sometimes they expect it to be RGBA. A lot of times I think in like OpenGL computer 3D graphics, it's more commonly RGBA. Anyway, it just means we're gonna have to do some Mac surgery to like switch things around, which I'll show you how to do. But so right away, we want these 3 numbers right here, RGB, and we don't want this alpha number right here. So I could say unpack. I think I give it, I have to say how many channels to unpack and what data type I'm unpacking. And I do that by doing 0 point, 0 point, 0 point, 0 point. So it's going to unpack 4 channels of data that are represented as floats. And now if I hooked up a float to any of these, it's giving me that. This would be the R, the G, you can see it's like that, and the B. And I want to pack it back together. I'm going to do POC. I'm going to do 0 point, 0 point, 0 point, 0 point. But I'm going to hook the first inlet or outlet, sorry, to the second one so that it goes right here, and then this one to this. So now I've just swapped the RGBA to be ARGB. And I'm not feeding anything into the first element in the list because I want that alpha plane. It doesn't really matter to me in terms of like green screening or chroma keying. It's just going to stay as 0 for as long as I do that. And now you can see that I flipped it back to what we want it to be, which is ARGB. And I feed it into here, and this is saying I'm expecting a 4-element list. Put element 1 here, element 2 here, element 3 here, element 4 here. And now I have the message color followed by 4 floats, and that's set up the way we want. Fun fact, I could just put 1, 1, 1, and it would take the first element of the list and put it in each of those locations. Or 2, 2, 2. We don't need to send the information this way, but that's kind of the logic of how this is working with this $1 thing. It's just saying, take that element of the list and put it here. And you could repeat that. You could shuffle them out of order if you wanted to. That was a little bit of a tangent, but now we can get to the good stuff. Let's see. Do I actually need this to be a 1? And this might be the thing where we did need to convert it into 255. Right there.
Yeah, I think we covered it because if you put a message output on the color, then you can see what color is actually being sent out from it. It's not the same until it's selected from the swatch.
It's, oh, am I getting the wrong outlet? Or what were you saying?
No, I mean, if you take the color 1, 2, 3, 4 and you put a message on the output from that,
Yeah.
you can see what color it's generating. Or actually, this is the first input.
Oh. Sorry, in the first.
Yeah. No, the other one. You got it. Wait. Yeah, put it there. Yeah, put it down. And then, you right there. You can see what color is coming out of it.
I think it's because all messages and objects, I could probably hook it up to another object too. And like, oh no, it's just messages. You can change the font and the color and everything, like, so I think it just happens to be the same. The message just will take a message called color and it'll change color based on receiving that. So, so it is working. I think it's just like we don't have a good color to really key off of it because I don't have anything like, I have this orange. I'm gonna, ooh, perfect. Yeah, okay, it works. So now like I have it all the way on this red and my tolerance is up and just this is what's coming through. But that brings me to my next thing where I was like, what if I just want to click on the image of where I want to key certain things out? There's something called sucka, which on the here's where I lose all credibility as a teacher and educator. And this easily has to be the worst named object in Max. Like, I don't even know, like, what, like, is there another software or language that uses this? Was, like, this too vulgar, or why the A? Anyway, so when I hit enter, I luckily don't have to see that word ever again. But I'll type it here so you know what it is. And you get this weird red thing. And I can zoom it to be the exact size of my P window here. And it has an outlet. And it will return to me the RGBA of anything. Okay, so now that I've locked it, it disappears. But I can just click, and it will return that color value.
Which color value though? The one in the middle of the
Whatever I click on. So now instead of having to like use this sucka object to like try and, or swatch object, I want to key out my face, and I can just click, and it'll find the pixels that are closest to my face and key those out. And this is what's a little like confusing, because I have it sized exactly to my jit.p window. It looks like it's coming out of my jit.p window, but it's not. It's coming out of this box, and I could literally put it anywhere, and now I can it'll return the color value of my patch. But it's only visible when I have the patch unlocked. So that would be something more if on the fly you wanted to like click on certain areas of an image and key all that out. And I'm doing the same thing. It also returns it as RGBA. So I'm just stealing the code I wrote here to unpack it and format it to fit all this. So yeah. So we got 8 minutes left, and that's like really cool and all, Matt. That I can do that shit in like After Effects or whatever the hot young kids. Ew, why did I say that? I didn't mean like that. Whatever the cool kids are doing these days with their Adobe Premiere and their Unity and their Unreal Engine 4, why do I need to know how to green screen something? Why can't you show me something real, man? I'm about to. I'm like losing it. What if I told you that we could take this outlet here and hook that up to be the thing that we're actually replacing the keyed out parts of the images for? I tell you you can, but you can't like this. Let's clean this up a little bit. Let's get our ducks in a row here for what's going to be the coolest thing you may ever see at ITP. No pressure. To me, I guess I'm saying that. And I basically want to take the image here and feed it back into itself as what we're replacing the keyed out information to be. But I can't do that. Every time I try to hook it up, it doesn't let me. I can, however, trick Max by making a jit matrix object and do nothing in terms of arguments. And if I give a jit matrix object and a matrix or an image with no arguments, it'll just adapt to whatever it's receiving. And basically, whatever is coming out of here is exactly what's going in with absolutely no changes made to it whatsoever. However, once I do that, then I can hook it up to the second inlet here. And if I key out, this is the feedback, but there's no movement on it. So it just continuously adding in on itself and replacing the image with what it's seen. And you've probably seen this with like audio feedback. I have a speaker, and I have a microphone, and that microphone goes to the speaker. I've got some cool jams coming out of my speaker, and it happens to bleed into this microphone, and that sound comes out of the speaker, which goes into the microphone, which comes out of the speaker, goes into the microphone, and we get this infinite audio feedback loop, and it usually results in this really like dissonant like sound that we really don't like, although there's an entire musical genre is made of nothing but audio feedback that are quite beautiful, and you should check out on your own time. But the same thing happens with video, and you've probably done this by accident. If I have a webcam on a USB cord, and I have QuickTime open, and the QuickTime is showing whatever is on the USB webcam. If I aim them in on each other, actually it's happening right now, kind of, in a way. Like, our camera is feeding to what's up on here, and then the camera's capturing that signal, and it's feeding back into itself. And we're doing that with this jit.chromakey object as well. We're just feeding the image back into itself, but we see this kind of representation because we're also cutting parts of the image out and asking it to be replaced with something. And it,
The still picture, would you have that?
what's that?
If the movie was still and the screen was still and you don't move at all.
If I don't move at all?
Yeah, like after a certain time, it should like overlap and be like a normal.
Oh, should I eventually?
Like if the back
You stay still.
Stay still.
I'm staying still.
Yeah, that's happening.
Because the keyed out part never comes back.
Oh yeah, because you have a key.
Yeah. But, holy shit, you guys, we know how to move an image. What object could we use to move that image? Jit.rota. And I'm going to just hard code this in because I know what I'm doing. But I want it to start in the center, and I want it to zoom out a little bit. So I'll do anchor X, and what was it, 1280 by 720, so that's 640. And at anchor Y, 360. And I will also say at zoom X, 1.01, and at zoom Y, 1.01. And I'll just slide all this down so you can actually see it kind of nice like this. And what if every single frame that came out of here, I zoomed a tiny bit and then fed back in, and then fed out some. And then what if I keyed out the background? Because I have that swatch object. I just click where I want this to go into infinity overdrive.
Is the frequency of that overdrive defined by the 1.01?
Exactly. So I can actually turn that into something like this. And your acceleration thing would work really fun with this. And I could also like have it shrink in on itself a little. I think my face just disappeared into itself for a second there. And we could also, what else can, we could set up the anchor to be at random points. We could also do a rotation. actually going to replace this with a movie that I had green screened and brought to class. It's not a, I just found it online, but. And then if we change the anchor point, I'll do like drunk 1280 10, which means it'll give me a random value in 1280, and then the next random value will be within 10 greater than or less than the previous value. So I get kind of like a little bit of like movement. And then this one will be drunk 720, and I'll hook up my Metro to that. And now the like pivot point of where it's like moving around from is like shifting around the image. Oh wait, I never hooked it up to anything. And then it becomes almost kind of like a painting tool. So, I love the video feedback in terms of like just abstract visuals is like the backbone of like weird, cool, psychedelic shit. And it's really easy to do it in Max, and it's really like fun to do it with like keying out objects like Chroma Key and Luma Key. And it's also like an example of like where bringing movement into things like the jit.rota object and start to change like the behaviors of things. This only works, it's like a mess here right now, but this only works because like I'm inserting this object into the feedback chain so that like as it's adding in on itself, we're also causing the image to expand or contract. The things I did not get to, jit.op, you can, it's like, how would I like, if I wanted to add a pixel value to any matrix, like if I took every single cell in a pixel and I wanted to add 5 to it to make it brighter, that's the jit.op can do. Alpha blend is a little bit like Luma Key, but instead of using luminance or whatnot, we can actually take an alpha image, like if we had like, if we wanted to do a star wipe to transition from one image to another, we could make a video of a white star growing, and it would say like, wherever we have this alpha plane, like move from this image to the secondary image based on it growing or shrinking or where it's black or white. Jit matrix set is where we can kind of like store a bunch of frames and play them back in kind of weird ways. I have tutorials for all of them. I have office hours on Fridays. I have an email that I check regularly. Yeah. And your homework for next week is the same as the homework it was this week, which is I just want you to take what you've been working on and start to expand on it, start to like figure out what you want to do with it, or explore some of these different tutorials I have to find out some new techniques and new tricks. Just kind of keep diving into Max, also writing down what doesn't make sense for you, what you're still kind of like hung up on, or that I'm not doing a good job explaining. And if you send me emails or you put it in the blog post, then like I have a better sense of how I can like address that in class. For those of you that put up your homework assignments, thank you. I'm going to do my best to leave a comment for each of you, partly because I see you all have different interests, and partly because I see little things in your code where I can make some comments of how it might perform better, or just consistent things I realize maybe someone doesn't understand. But yeah, are there any questions before I let everyone go?
So I want to do like grayscale mask, so can have an opacity. Can I use like a grayscale image for my alpha?
Yeah, it would work the same thing. Like it would basically be like a fade.
Right.
So if it was somewhere between, if it was gray, it'd just be like it'd kind of blend both images together. But a hard white would blend one, a hard black the other, and then somewhere in between.
The same Luma Key or Chroma Key gets that input.
And you can use the fade attribute to control that. Rebecca?
So the, I guess, 3-minute video performance.
Yeah.
Is that going to be like physical interaction?
It can be. I think one of the things I'll show you guys how to do really quick, I can show you how to bring Arduino into Max really quick. Do you want to do physical interaction?
I was just curious as to like which direction how would we perform it?
So for this one, in terms I want you to follow your own direction, and if you have something you're interested in, that's great. For this one, I'm more expecting you're performing the video. So this is kind of like a static image on it, or not static, but it's like here's like a set image on the screen, and based on the system you've built, you're performing the transitions between things or different effects or choosing different video clips, and you have an interface in front of you. If you want to turn any of those interface aspects into a physical tool, like a MIDI keyboard or an accelerometer or a gyroscope on your phone that's going to your computer, you're more than welcome to turn that into a performance. I'm not requiring it just because like there's 2 whole classes I could do, which I will do, teaching you how to bring things that are like more physical and more motion based and like more body based into Max, so we can take things out of this computer realm. But right now it's more, I'm hoping to get you guys just thinking about like how to manipulate live video, how to build your own interfaces, how to like get comfortable with Max and try something with that. That work? Cool. Mm-hmm.
Office hours are done.
The what?
Like, I mean, it's cool.
Oh yeah, you guys are like blowing me up during this class. I'll add more office hours, like 12 to 4. Hmm? I think you just did. So.
I wasn't pressing it. I was pressing this.
Yeah, I think
Oh, so you can't. So like, in the same way that we can do like read and start and stop with the jit.rota, you have to tell your camera to open. You can also close it. So that's where we have that message.
Can I take you guys off there for this week? Because I think Aaron wrote me into the 1 + 1 = 3 thing on Friday.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So I don't really know what to do yet. I'll send you an email.
Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Sounds good.
Yeah.
Hey.
I got a really good question.
Yeah.
When I'm adding this, I was just playing around with some like stuff. It's like a computer vision on my face, but I'm just wondering why it's like the alpha channel seems to not be getting taken out. Like when I add it back in, I'll show you what I've got here. So this is like my output. It's like a face.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so my face is actually here. Just getting Luma Key. So, depending on where my face is, it's like getting my face.
Yeah.
But when I add it back into the matrix, it's like trying to overlay it, which is like I'm adding it back in, but it seems like the alpha is not being taken out. Like it's the black bit. It's like.
What do you? Oh, I see exactly. It's still the border of the full image itself.
Yeah, the full border.
Mm-hmm.
So I was wondering why that might be the case. Because usually that would take out the alpha, right? Because I've got just like a blank matrix. Like that's just like a.
Where are you getting the star from?
The star is like. The star is coming from up here.
You imported it once as that?
Yeah.
Okay, I think the alpha blend is what you would want to do.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I didn't cover it in class obviously, but alpha blend objects in Max is not very intuitive.
Yeah.
So here's what I would do.
Yeah.
I mean, I copy paste the help code.
Yeah, yeah.
But what's happening is oh, this is terrible. Let me see one more. We still need to feed it an RGBA image, but then we're going to swap out the existing alpha plane and replace it with one that's coming to the second inlet here.
And that'll do
So
it?
yeah, and jit.op, what it's saying is this is where we can see you can like do mathematical operations on this one.
Yeah.
Pass means just pass it without doing anything,
Yeah.
you know.
So
And also because I
then
put 4 arguments in it, it actually can do it individually based on each plane.
Right, okay.
And then the inverse with the exclamation point is saying don't pass the alpha plane from that first image and replace it with what's coming into the second image. And when jit alpha blend gets that into its first inlet, then it can like replace it with something here.
As long as I know that's the way to do it, I can do
Yeah,
that.
so I think you'd want to take your original image through the jujitsu right here. And then the question is, could you leave that blank? You know what you could do a lot of times? Like sometimes it's a trick in Max when you're like, I actually don't need to key anything into here. You can just, sometimes it still requires a matrix. So you can just say jit matrix, load bang.
Because that's just an activity.
Yeah, and like then it's like cool. Like I have something to work with. It's stored there. I know it's nothing, but thanks for giving me something. Yeah. Cool.